Right. Let's get started then. It's the Wednesday, September 3rd meeting of the Dunn County Planning, Resource and Development Committee. It looks like all members of the committee are here, so we have a quorum. Approval of the minutes. Do I have a motion? Diane moves. Is there a second? Gary seconds. Any corrections, additions? All in favor of approval, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Minutes are approved. Do we have any public comments? Anyone here have public comments on either of those two items, either generally or with regard to the comprehensive plan? Okay. We have no public hearing. I think the parties for 9A are here. So without objection, let's move that up to this point in the agenda, and we'll start with that. Tom, you want to?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everyone. So we'll jump down. Let me get my portion of the presentation up here. So I have a staff report that was in the packet. Hopefully you've all had a chance to read that. I'm going to bring up the certified survey map that was submitted for review to the county. So this is what the applicant is looking at doing. They're looking at parceling off 1 acre of property that contains a home and the associated improvements, which would be the driveway, well, and a septic. It has frontage on the Hay River. Everything about the lot meets county standards except for the access. Okay, so our county land division ordinance says anytime you're creating a new parcel, it has to have 33 feet of frontage, either directly on a public highway or on an access easement that would connect it to a public highway. So with that said, let's go back in time. So in 2005, predecessor entitled to the Harmons purchased the property. They purchased 100 acres. I'm going to bring this up on the county GIS website. Hopefully everybody can see this. I know the lighting is not perfect in here, but if you can see where my cursor is here, they purchased the north half of this 40. They purchased this entire 40 right here and the entire 40 to the west. So they ended up purchasing 100 acres. That was in 2005. Over where my cursor is here, and let me zoom in, is the town road. And you can see the road right of way is arced right there. And the parcel that was purchased, this full of 100 acres, was technically landlocked. It didn't have an easement, and the corner of it did not go out or extend out into the right of way of 320th Street. So in 2000, I have the history here, in 2018, the current owner at the time, who was predecessor entitled to the current owners, they approached Mr. and Mrs. Hoover that owned land to the north, and they acquired an easement from Hoovers. So that was in 2018. I have the description here. Basically, let me go back into the packet. So if I zoom in, this crosshatch area that shows up on the certified survey map right here, that is the easement that was granted in 2018. It's basically a 33-foot square in the 140, and then there's a meets and bounds description on the angled part. So that easement ranges anywhere from 27 feet wide on the diagonal to 33 feet wide. Neither dimension meets the 66-foot requirement in our ordinance. So that's why we're here today. We fully realized that we would have existing easements that we would have to deal with. So we had a provision placed in the land division ordinance that says anytime an existing easement is used to serve a newly created lot which doesn't meet the ordinance standards, the applicant shall go before the committee and the town, the respective town, to determine the adequacy of the easement and what conditions, if any, need to be met to provide for adequate access. So we're not looking at a variance. None of that is just simply discussion between the committee and some action today on whether or not the committee feels this existing easement, which is substandard, which was created before the adoption of our ordinance, grandfathered in, so to speak, is this easement adequate? I've reviewed the map. Zoning office has reviewed it. I certainly feel the easement is adequate. It's in place. There's a driveway located over the top of it. It's serving one lot, which will never be further subdivided. I could see if this easement was going back in and going to be serving a 44 lot subdivision someday, then in my mind, it's not adequate. But let me just pull up the GIS again. The Hay River poses a significant barrier for any further development of the remaining acreage on the west side of the river. Remember, there's most of the 100 acres that is currently owned by the Harmons is on the west side of the river. And the likelihood of putting a bridge across there, some type of crossing and developing all this is highly unlikely. So again, this easement is going to serve this 1 acre lot that's being created, and the Harmons, I would imagine, are also going to use that to come in and access the remainder of their property. So I feel from my review that the easement is more than adequate. I've talked with Dave Bartlett, town chair for Sherman, or Sheridan, I'm sorry. They have this item agended, I believe it's September 9th. So it's coming up. Dave was going to be here today, but then another commitment came up. He couldn't make it. I heard from him yesterday. He said he's looked at it. He personally doesn't see any issues, and he feels the town board also will not see any issues. However, they haven't taken action yet, and that will be happening next week. So Taylor and Nathaniel Harmon are here in the back. They can certainly answer any questions that the committee might have. So again, I'm looking for action, either approval or denial that this easement is going to be adequate for the intended purpose. So I don't have anything else to add, and I'll turn it back over to you, Tom. Looking for a motion to
Okay.
approve this, and I can answer any questions.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Committee have any questions or comments? Gary?
Would you postpone it, I mean, until after the meeting of the Sheridan Town Hall or town meeting, just to get it, it's approved, if it's approved at the meeting, at the town hall meeting.
And if I may, perhaps the committee could conditionally approve it. So in other words, approve it based on the town also approving it. That way, when the town did take action, then it just passes through. We wouldn't have to have another
Right.
meeting. That would be my recommendation. A conditional approval based on the town also approving it at their next meeting.
I'd like to go with that suggestion.
Is there, before we do a motion, are there any other questions or clarifying points? So just to be one, so this is not something that the ordinance states that our role is to basically make a judgment as to whether or not this is acceptable.
Basically, we're looking at suitability. Does the committee feel that the easement is suitable for its intended purpose? In other words, to provide access to a 1 acre lot? I guess I look at it from a practical side. If somebody's gonna put a pole shed on this building someday and they have to have a truck deliver some concrete or materials, is it wide enough? If it's only 8 feet wide, I would argue it probably isn't gonna serve the purpose, but in my mind, most service vehicles can get in there, that would be accessing the property. Certainly, if it's for a residential driveway, the width is adequate. It has no further development or subdivision potential, so.
Okay.
Mhm.
All right, anyone else? Anyone care to make a motion on this?
I will.
Okay, Mike,
I move that we approve this, that we approve it, based pending the approval by the town board.
so the motion is that we approve the proposed judgment that the easement is acceptable, meets appropriate conditions as is, subject to the subsequent approval by the town board.
I'll
Correct.
second that motion.
Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion is approved. Thank you. Thank you for coming, yes. And you don't have to feel obliged to stay. Good luck. Let's see. Back up to staff reports. 7A, review of land use division fee schedule.
Good morning. In your packets, I included the 2021 fee schedule that the land division or the land use division is currently using. The last time that was, was adopted was 21. Prior to that, it was 2018. So I thought I'd first start out by just overview of our permit history. And kind of given that trend, overall, I would just say on average, we're going to average around 300 zoning permits and around 200 sanitary permits. And then another key number to take away from here is, I'm going to say we've got about 10,500 septic systems that have been inventoried in our system. So jumping to the fee schedule, and kind of exploring some options. On the left, again, is showing our current fees. We can talk about some proposed fees. I also included Pierce County, Barron, Polk, and Chippewa County as far as comparisons to what their fees are. It's difficult to compare like an Eau Claire County and St. Croix County because they have delegated authority, so their fees are higher because they do the state review versus our permits. So a state sanitation permit goes to the state for their review, and then they come to us for an additional review. So I don't know if we want to dive into this initial fee structure as far as a comparison goes, but if just kind of Barron and Chippewa, for example, for the same conventional sanitary permit are less. And then Polk and Pierce County are higher. So we're at that $475.
Do you have any other general observations about this as you've looked at it?
I would put it at our fees are, fairly reasonable. I mean, they are, the more efficient we become as staff, I feel like, we are already at probably recouping our cost and then some. I mean, I can certainly put more numbers to it. I know that the handout that was part of priority-based budgeting was reflecting, several staff. And I think as we, incorporate new improvements, we're going to get staff hours down less that are being billed to that POUTS program.
Anybody in the committee have any just general observations or questions on that?
Tammy, if I may, drain field replacement, remove. And then the minor repair is obviously in addition.
Correct. Yep. I would recommend, we don't, again, as you can see, we aren't receiving a drain field replacement. It's typically going to be a new system. So
Okay,
they get charged as a conventional or a mound.
okay, all right, thank you.
May I ask a question?
Yeah.
So what's the rationale behind having a fee for a minor repair when the other counties don't?
This is oftentimes, there's a reconnection. So someone's adding a garage, for example, and going to connect it, and then they find that the tank needs to get replaced or some other components, then there's additional staff time review of that paperwork, a change, for lack of a better term, like a change order.
Mhm.
So that would just reflect that additional staff time for those minor repairs.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Since we just spent a whole bunch of hours looking at ways to raise revenue, would it make sense to raise the fees?
We can certainly explore what that percent would look, what that revenue could look like. I mean, if we look at, given our permit count, we can obviously run that number to say, okay, if we would increase by 10%, what are we gonna gain? 15, 20, whatever percent. I mean, that's very doable. If you want.
Are we allowed to charge more than it costs us?
No, I think the state statute is pretty clear. It's, to recoup our cost for providing that service.
So if we have a fee that recoups our cost for sure, it might go over a little bit, but we don't know. That would be our goal. To make sure we're recouping it. And does this, it sounds like you think ours does now.
I do feel it does. I can move on to another slide if you
Yeah,
guys
let's
are.
do that.
So entering to the next topic related to this and other fees, our Wisconsin County Code Administrators just recently did an inventory. It turns out certain counties are actually doing a special assessment for every system to cover that maintenance component. So when I say what our fees are covering, our fees are covering staff time doing the review and the inspection. What we are not necessarily recouping is that maintenance side of it. And we're getting there, right? We have this amazing software now that is allowing us to track maintenance notices, but going forward, we're going to be sending roughly 5,000 notices out every year. And that's, going to be data entry and then follow up, right? So having that code enforcement to ensure those systems are actually getting maintained. So right now, a maintenance notice goes out, but we haven't had a system or a process to actually follow up to see if it's been reported or not. So there is a component of, do we look at special assessment? It's a special charge that would go on the property taxes to every property owner who has a POUT system. So again, this kind of gives an example overview of the counties who are doing this on the left. Versus, and again, the average price, I know you guys can really read the fine print here, but the average billed rate is $7 a year. So if you take, again, our 10,500 systems, and again, if like at Chippewa County, for example, is at $5. So if we even just, that would be around 52,000.
And that would be to cover all the sort of ancillary costs associated with operating the system that aren't directly paid for by the fees.
Correct. Yep. So if a system is installed, today, if you look at that $475 for a conventional, we're hoping to get 20 to 30 years out of that system. But we're sending maintenance notices out every 3 years and required to track that, right? So that's a state mandate that we are required to have a tracking or required to have our.
Follow up if they're
follow.
not.
Correct.
Yeah.
So to date, I'm very careful, right? I feel very nervous publicly announcing this, but we haven't done follow-up.
Right.
Since the state mandate. We haven't had the staff to do a follow-up. We haven't had a solid system to track it. So, we do have a software. So again, the maintenance could cover that software that we have now.
So I had like two sites that I got done this year. And the sanitary people had to send in a letter. Is there any correlation of if you send out 5,000 like notices, what percent come back that they've been checked out by by sanitation?
That's a really great question, and I can get you that number. Again, so we just switched over to our new system. So our notices actually went out under our old software system. So but we do have a new way, or as they come in, they are tracked. So I can do a calculation to tell you what's our percent return. That would be very helpful. Good question.
So, Mike, go ahead. Oh, I thought you were gonna press. No, you go ahead, guys.
This is something that I thought would be, we should have done a while ago. Especially with the tracking system and software and time and everything else. $5 a year for Chippewa, $7 average. It seems like it's a no-brainer. It's a tax, if you want to put it that way, but I look at it as more billing for a service, not a tax.
So the committee could ask you, could come back with a formal proposal for us to act. And if your initial suggestion is $5, but we could discuss that after you look at it further. And
Mhm.
so is that okay with the committee? If we ask staff to come back to us with a recommendation? Okay, great.
May I, real quick, may I ask, when you present that, can you put this into our meeting packet?
Absolutely.
Just so I can
Yep,
see
yep,
it?
absolutely.
Thank
And
you.
I can send it out after the meeting
Okay,
today.
okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
What is the green? So there's two different ones. One's billed with maintenance. So the department actually sends a bill out to every property owner for that maintenance versus the special charge, which goes in on the tax roll. Again, we're gonna have to investigate the logistics of that because my understanding is towns only have special assessment authority in the county. So we'll have to work with the treasurer and court counsel to actually, determine the logistics on that.
Okay. Yeah.
I just want to make sure that, like, just from a timing, if this were to be something that goes on a tax roll, it's not gonna happen by December. So
Right.
we would be looking at 2027.
Yeah.
Yep. Thanks, Tim.
Mhm. That's
Wow.
correct, yeah, because I think it's like the deadline is October 15th or whatever for a special charge, and that would be a miracle to pull off.
Yeah. Well, the important thing is policy going forward and
Correct. It gives us a path to determine revenue. All right, next. Oh, I'm
One
scared.
question. So if a person does like send in that sanitary permit, so why should they be charged $5 when they're already doing the law?
That's fair. So they would not, I mean, I guess I would look at it if it's a new system, right? They haven't been assessed anything yet. And so really, we would have to wait until that maybe 3 years comes into play. We'd have to build that in so that at that 3-year trigger is when they would then probably be
that's
assessed.
the point they were required to file the.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. That's good question. And maybe we'd probably even build it simply that way, as that would be triggered that year. And we can have that flag in our parcel records that way. It'd be definitely a lot of logistics, and these little
way.
components yep.
Yeah.
Will we have to notify all of the, permit holders when we make this change?
Well, this would be a resolution I would envision that would have to go through the county board. This would be, at least, I mean, the committee could choose to hold a public hearing, information meeting. That would be, at the discretion of the committee or county board for that additional change. But there would be value in having outreach onto why we're doing this. I would strongly encourage that. And Dan is back there nodding his
Yeah.
head too.
We just gotta put Dan's number down for questions.
Correct.
Call Dan. Okay.
I see that we have a couple of town chairs in the audience. I don't know if it makes sense to ask them if they have input on this at this time.
Anybody have a thought? Yeah. You see the point of that, Gene?
Yeah, where you wanna cover your expenses to document what's going on. You know, it gets logged someplace, doesn't it? I mean, it's. We've all been doing this for decades. Anyone that's got a septic system, so. And where it really becomes important is when you're conveying the property. To show that it has been properly maintained. I keep. And the thing is, we know as property owners, at this point, we used to get the sheets signed by the, guy that sucks it out, and looks at it. We don't get that anymore. It all goes right to the county. So, you know, there may be something where, so now we're relying on the county to provide that record keeping. Is it worth $5 a year for me to have them do it? Maybe. But sometimes it's easier to just go to my file and say, oh, here they are. Sometimes it's hard to find it in my file, and it's easier to call the county and ask them, or the state. I don't know, does the state keep a record of that too?
The dialogue, I don't know if his comments are being captured. So, you know, the dialogue for those who are listening into the meeting is really, you know, what's that process for logging from the inspection? So the inspection notice should go out to the homeowner, that paperwork, you know, whether it's a licensed pumper or a plumber who does the inspection or maintenance is required to fill that out and submit that to us. So you know, whether that a copy of that goes to the homeowner is unknown. What I could say though from our side is once we receive that, that's entered into our database and it becomes public record. And with our new system, it's going to be public facing. So anyone will be able to pull up that history, that maintenance history for any system. And quite honestly, a lot of our requests are from real estate transactions. Property's going up for sale and the realtor wants those maintenance records for their real estate listings, are able to provide it. So we are a clearinghouse for all of that info. But I think it's fair to define expectations, right? I mean, I would see if we do this fee, we really need to have the staff in place to follow up with, like, if it's not getting reported, now what?
Those are all considerations, and the fee should reflect the ability to meet those expectations.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. Or anybody else? Anything else? All right. Thanks a lot.
All right. So next one, that was sanitation fees, now into zoning fees. Again, I didn't dive into, you know, adding numbers yet, but again, if we think about the 300, you know, number, I would initially suggest we actually come up with an additional fee structure. I just added this line. So right now, an accessory structure. So someone puts up that shed that's less than 1,000 square feet has to pay $125. Related to that is we get a lot of requests for garden sheds. The, you know, 120 square foot garden shed. And I struggle as a staff member charging someone $125 for that garden shed. So as a placeholder, I'm just recommending something less than 500 square feet, right? So right now we require a zoning permit for anything over 100 square feet. So that 100 square feet to up to 1,000 is charged the same fee. And, you know, a garden shed can be questioned on whether it can be moved easily. What's our purpose of that fee? So I would recommend just adding that. So again, I probably will get through this and say we're actually gonna have less revenue, so I gotta be careful on, how much I open up. And I can certainly come forward with, more numbers. I can give you guys stats on how many garden sheds under 1,000 square feet we do, if that would make you guys feel more comfortable. Again, just as a, just to start the conversation, I would offer that up. An additional, looking at our shoreland fee structure, I would remove this shoreland pervious surface. I don't have history on it. It doesn't quite make sense to me on what that meant. I really think the intent was to have a way to capture a fee for our unzoned townships. And so that would be what I would, transfer that price to, or that fee amount to what we'd call like a shoreline for unzoned town. Again, roughly, I wouldn't, at this point recommend too many changes to the other fee structure. I would add a transfer density. Again, that will come up hopefully later in our conversation, but our ordinance does reference transfer density fee in the fee schedule, but yet we don't have a mechanism or fee to do that. Tower permits, as I expressed last month, I think we've had 10 tower permits and we were just charging $200 of our zoning, just our general zoning fee. And state statute actually allows us to charge up to $3,000 for a new tower. And for tower modifications, we can charge up to $500. I would propose that $800 for new towers. I mean, because we still want infrastructure. I mean, I think there's value in encouraging, infrastructure in our county. And again, the committee can choose to even raise that higher. I just put $800 as a starting point. And then for tower modifications, I would at least recommend $300 for that. There's a tremendous amount of staff times that goes into our tower permit review.
Questions?
So towers, are we talking about like cell towers, radio towers?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
And I'm sorry, I don't know what transfer density is.
We can talk about, I actually have a slide about transfer density coming up here.
Okay.
And we can dive into that further,
Okay,
if that's
can wait.
fair.
Yeah, that's fine.
Just a question on what you gave us. I remember a while back, we were hiring Cedar Corp to do expedited things. Are we doing that anymore?
We don't hire Cedar Core. We handle expedited in-house. And I think actually they were just hired for the sanitation.
Yeah.
Okay, so we still have expedited.
We do.
And what does that mean?
Our policy right now is an expedited is less than 10 days. So we have, right now, we're getting several requests for expedited permits. It's the crunch for
This time of year.
this time of year.
Okay, anything else? Yeah. So the proposal, you would take another look at this, come back to us with a more specific
Yep.
request that we could adopt or modify.
Yeah, this is just kind of to get a rough, idea if the committee is feeling
Yep.
comfortable with this. And just some minor
I
modifications.
think Ed's not, so let's go ahead.
Perfect. All right, so then that was all I had for fee schedule. I was going to jump into the ordinance conversation next. So again, I just put, provided the slides that I presented last month. I know we ran through them very quickly. This is the same slide as before. What would be very helpful for me is to help understand perceptions and expectations of and specifically, I want to focus on the attached ADU, right? What's that attached accessory dwelling unit? What does that mean to the committee? So I'm going to show some pictures coming up here. there's, so these are the general images, stock images out there. Again, the additional dwelling unit with a vertical expansion of a dwelling, conversion of something in a basement for a dwelling unit, an addition out the side, and then obviously a detached accessory dwelling. And so for us as staff, we're thinking, so when I hear attached ADU, my mind goes to a duplex. Right? That's what my image is that the concern that we have a duplex out there? So for example, is this an attached ADU? It could be. Or is it an addition?
I'm sorry, when we say is this, what is this? Are we talking about the above
garage.
garage living
That way.
space? Is that what it is?
Correct.
And does it have a separate entrance to the outside?
That's a great question, right? So Monica's keying in on a key component here is for an attached ADU, it has to have a separate entrance. So could this be handled as a addition if it did not have a separate entrance?
Do you mean an addition versus an ADU?
Correct. And this is a reoccurring thing for us right now as staff is trying to really decipher between what is that home addition and what is an attached ADU. And so are we managing perceptions? What does this look like? What are we trying to manage? And again, thinking of our general ag district versus our R1 and R2 districts, right? So in R2, you can have a duplex.
Right.
So, appearance is one standard, function is another. How would you define the function of a ADU different from the function of an addition?
Correct. It have that, so there's probably three key areas that we've kind of focused on as staff is the separate entrance. They have a separate utility, right? So they have their own electrical panel, they're getting their own electrical bill. And then the third would be an address. They were able to get a second address for that property. Those are the kind of the minor elements that change it for us.
Okay.
And I got some additional images just to keep. Again, this one, again, is it vertical expansion with, living space above, or is it, a mother-in-law apartment interior somewhere? Is it a attached ADU? How about this one? We're assuming that this one has a entrance on the side. So maybe this one does have a separate entrance, utility, address. And so that I'm just trying to like really understand, is our fear of a duplex on the top left, right? Do we want an attached ADU to look like a duplex? Right, that one's very obvious. On the bottom, that's also marketed as a duplex. Or could it be an ADU? And I don't mean to make, it's just the frustrations we're facing as staff. So to help understand where the committee and the thoughts are, so that would help us craft maybe some minor tweaks to this ordinance.
Sure.
Again, it's the attached ADU that's getting the challenge versus an addition. And So we
So-
met with the building inspector. So if we go back to just like this example. Someone's adding a garage with living space. We have a plan in front of us right now that is showing that living space. They're showing the kitchen, they're showing a bathroom, but they're showing it as an office and a gym. Can those office and gym actually be bedrooms? And what happens now is we're setting the stage where they aren't going to meet uniform dwelling code because they don't want to call it an habitable space. So we're then saying, well, if you have a shared entrance, if you don't do separate utilities, and if you don't get an address, we can treat it as a home addition. And then the building inspector is like, well, if it is going to have living space up at the second story, there is actually an emergency exit and other components. So then they need to have a balcony, a staircase. So then does that trigger a second entrance? So I would say the goal should be, safe structures. Let's set homeowners up for success. And if they're going to do the living space above the garage, I'd rather have it built to code than someone to say it's just going to be a gym. No bedrooms, no one's going to be sleeping up there.
I'm trying to understand, and I'm not, why this would trigger an ordinance change.
I'll show that next.
Okay, because, yeah, all right.
Mike, go ahead.
And just to be clear, if something is an addition, it's treated totally differently than an attached ADU.
Correct.
And it's different than duplex.
Correct.
So how would an ADU be different than a duplex? Those are all questions you're asking?
Correct.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
And I don't know, was that discussed, previously about the duplex versus the attached ADU?
I don't think it came up in that context, no. I think, but I remember we at one point in time were told that we were already having in, say, areas around the lake, there were homeowners that were basically doing ADUs by adding an addition to their house. And I'm sure that's still going on, or that's not what you're talking about now, though. That's a separate thing.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, because mind you, like in our residential districts, we allow duplexes. So where this is going is now I'm going to dive into the general ag district. So bear with me.
Can I make a comment?
Yeah.
I think that our ordinance differentiates ADUs from district or duplexes in a couple of ways. I think an ADU needs to be subordinate in size, right? And I think of duplexes as being two identical units. And I think we said that the ADU needs to be constructed later than the main units, so they can't be constructed at the same time. So that's two differences that I see. I don't know if that's enough to allay any worries that we're going to be talking about later, but.
Well, we could have a duplex of both 1,200 square feet.
But I think that it said subordinate in size.
It does.
1199,
I mean-
1,200.
Sure, yes.
And we did kind of discuss the fact that they could end up being the same as duplexes, especially when we were talking about the size. We started off with 1,400 square feet, I remember. But yeah, so there was discussion, but there's no answer. At least we didn't have one.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I was gonna suggest that. Gene, I think your comment would be appropriate, but could you go up to the front and make it from, at the microphone, name and address and all that?
Does it,
So we can get it on record, that's all. Yep. Yep.
okay, this is Gene Ringer, Town Chair, Lucas Township. And the question, Tom had questioned the functionality of the ADU versus a duplex. You know, and with the ADU, it's owned by the property owner, as opposed to a duplex where you can have each side owned by different families or entities. And I think in either case, it can be rented. Or with the ADU, you can rent out the ADU to a separate entity. So, I mean, that's where it gets really squishy, trying to figure out how that all works out. The other is with respect to a entry. Most multi-family units, like apartment buildings that have one entry and then doors coming off to feed the other parts of it. So like if you have the single entry and the upstairs, you have a hallway that goes up to the upstairs and feeds in with a single front door. I mean, back doors and whatever could be accessed to provide the emergency egress or one of the ground floor windows. But anyway, so those are all my comments.
Thanks, Gene. Anything else anyone have?
Would it be all right if I moved on to the?
Yeah, let's
next
go,
slide?
keep going, see if we can sort through this.
So I'm bringing up density now. So this will come into the transfer density and what's happening in our general ag district, right? So we are, again, our request for the attached ADUs oftentimes are in the general ag district. And it's occurring on parcels 5 acres or less. So right now, that 5-acre general ag zoned parcel cannot do an attached ADU because they don't have density. So, you know, again, revisiting what's our land base in Dunn County that is zoned general ag? We're roughly around 80% of our parcels that are zoned general ag. I'm just kind of going to skip through this slide here and jump into an example. So if we just look at a 40-acre parcel, we just even focused on owner B, who has 40 acres. They have 5 splits. We had this idea of what they could transfer density from contiguous parcels. Right, so can we, you know, the goal here, and this slide probably isn't the greatest, but the goal here is to create the cluster of housing and preserve the agricultural land. This is an example that we're facing right now. Town of Red Cedar, 40 acres. And we have right now 4 housing units in that 40 acres. We cannot transfer density because the transfer density is only allowed with between, you know, I'll jump to the next parcel. You have to be the owner of the other parcel in order to transfer density. The second, you know, component to this is that the parcels will only be able to be transferred have to have a common boundary. So I'm going to jump back up to this one. So the one that's highlighted is they would like to do an ADU. We can't transfer density to allow it. They're going to have to rezone. And maybe the answer is that they have to rezone. But even for an attached ADU, for them to add an addition to that home, they do not have, or the attached ADU, they do not have density. And we're gonna, right now, require them to rezone for $650, 3 months later, to get that attached ADU.
Sort of defeats the whole purpose of the ADU ordinance. Yeah.
So in this case, is it about density? Is it about keeping 5 residential units to that 40 acres? If it is, that's fair, and we want to still track density. Could we create a mechanism, minor changes to the ordinance that would allow that transfer? So then they could go to the farmer who is operating the land to the left there, the larger tract. Many communities are doing this, and they pay that property owner for that density unit.
Right.
We have that transfer density fee, we're tracking it, Tom tracks it, and then we at least kept that density to the expectations of that district.
And that's a negotiation between two landowners.
And then it's a private.
I know that's being done all over the place.
Mhm. That's one component to it.
Yeah.
I mean, if we want it, the alternative is, would the committee be receptive to just saying an attached ADU does not require an additional density? A detached would work with that mechanism of the transfer for that detached, but could an attached ADU be waived that density requirement?
Seems pretty sensible to me. And it encourages, the whole idea, of permitting ADUs was to allow, additional living space. So I think we should make it as easy on homeowners as possible. Fewer restrictions.
And I think the key is the different, really deciphering between the attached versus detached. I'm not saying that detached ADU, shouldn't have density, right? If that's the goal, that we have that density, we create that mechanism for that to be transferred.
Right.
Or rezone. But and this is simply just for the attached ADU.
Sure.
Are we still talking of that, 1 to 8, then? That's not being changed at all?
Correct,
It's just how it's going to be spread out?
correct.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm Mike first and then I was calling you. Ching.
So I'm not sure if I understood what Supervisor Morehouse meant. You offered 2 options. One is to allow just to disregard the density for an attached, and the other one was to transfer density.
Right.
Which one did you?
I would say allow.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sorry if I wasn't
Allow for both of them?
cogent.
You would allow for density in both scenarios?
Yeah.
Or you would waive the density
Yes.
requirement in both scenarios?
Yes.
So that's one proposal.
Okay. I'm just curious how difficult it is when someone comes in, I'm gonna add something onto my house. And they don't want to go through any of the work, so they just want to call it an addition. And you mentioned this a little bit before. Do you really have any recourse in those situations where they're adding on something that's going to be a living space for somebody?
I created a worksheet. If you talk to my staff, I'm obsessed with worksheet and just, disclosures, right? So we can't come up with our criteria, right? Outlining the intent. So I developed a worksheet in the case of this addition with the living space above the garage. They acknowledged, or, spelled out the intent of that addition and said it's not going to have separate utility. It's not going to have this. It's not going to have this. Check the box. in discussion with corporation counsel, that becomes more defendable for us if, in case we do have a situation where we are questioning that ADU or that use of that property. Again, I don't know what that triggered, what does that look like, right? When more vehicles, I guess I think of like, okay, are we getting a lot of vehicles accumulating here? They're advertising, there's, and the flip side, it becomes habitable and they're not meeting dwelling code, right? Then it gives something for the building inspector to utilize. So to, answer, it's just, as long as we can have a worksheet and disclaimers and check boxes on file to give us something a little bit more teeth to, then that is in addition to our ordinance, it's helpful. I know I kind of expanded too much, but again, it's really coming back to the intent of what do we really want to be regulating and what does that look like when it changes?
Okay, thank you, Tammy. It's, people are always, there's always someone that's gonna try to get by. And that sounds like you have a good way to do it. I would be for spreading the density out. That's a slower step, and it happens and it's easily done rather than just throwing out the density.
I tend to lean that direction too, but what we have, again, we have town board chairs here, and especially one, Gene, your friend town of Lucas was hesitant about ADUs. You want to share your thoughts about this? What?
Yeah, Gene Ranger, Town of Lucas. We had an extensive discussion about this, and the real concern was density. And that it would provide a backdoor to enhanced density in our ag units. And the transfer, I think, takes care of that. That it wouldn't change from the 1 to 8. It would just allow for having 2 units on one parcel that then there's reduced elsewhere. I mean, it's the whole idea of having if you have a 40, and for us, it's 2.5 acres for the lot size. So if we had 5 2.5 acre parcels that all had residents, or 4, and then one of them had an ADU on it, that's the 5 for the 40 and provides for the density and would be fine. And the rest of it maintains ag use. It's just that we saw and had a concern with putting in ADUs. It would be a backdoor to having a second residence on the property and thus provide 10 residential units per 40 acres as opposed to 5. And so that was our major concern. And then Tammy assured us that no, there's a 1 to 8 ratio, and that it clearly defines that there would only be 5. So if you had 2 of the parcels with ADUs on, that left only 1 more residential unit for the rest of the 40, which we said, oh, that's okay. Now, I didn't. So anyway, so that was our concern, and would remain our concern if indeed you're not even considering the 1 to 8 for allowing ADUs.
Thank you, Jim. Any other, you have other comments you want to make, Tammy? So, we have sort of 2 approaches, and I'm hearing the committee leaning towards the approach of continuing to use density with regard to the detached ADUs. Is that fairly summarize it?
I'm sorry, I feel like I need I'm not understanding the terminology. So what you're saying is that there seems to be consensus around allowing transfer of density.
Yes.
Okay.
Or detached ADUs, requiring it.
Or yes, okay. Yeah, okay.
In the situations where minimum lot size and stuff dictates that.
Correct. How about attached ADUs?
Well, let's talk about that. I think my sense was that people were okay with that not being reflected in density. Anyone disagree with that? Okay.
I would be reluctant to make that move, based on what Mike has said and what Jean has said. We had a lot of painful discussions about this a year ago. I think that we would have the same conversations if we tried to make this move again. I don't think we'd have the consensus we need.
And I would say too that if the like ADU is rented out to somebody that's not part of the family, because it started out as a mother, to come in and live in there, that it should be counted in density. Because it's a different person living there. They have, I don't know about the address, how that's gonna work out. But it's almost kind of looking like a duplex. I mean, to a certain extent, depends on who's living there. And that's the reason we got density out in the country is because people want a little more freedom. We talked about like last time of people that buy a lot out there, but they want more rooms, they buy a lot next to it. So it still has a lot of like meaning in my looking at it.
I mean, I agree with Supervisor Barrier that there were painful discussions, but the point of the accessory dwelling unit, and our consideration of it was to allow some flexibility for landowners to make a choice about how to use their property. I think the goal, at least my goal in being a strong supporter of this, was to give homeowners flexibility in doing this and to increase our ability to meet the housing needs of the county. I just am hard pressed to see how an attached ADU would require a transfer of density. It doesn't make sense to me.
Can I put you on the spot again, Gene? Can you go up, could I go up there and ask you a question, okay? So the reason I'm asking Gene to come up is because I know the town of Lucas did really express concern about this and in the end ended up agreeing to support it. But so the idea of an attached ADU not requiring a allocation of density, how would that, again, this is Gene, your name and address, I guess. Gene Ringer from Lucas.
Gene Ringer, Town of Lucas.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't see the attached ADU being any different than a duplex. And that it's just a matter of, as Gary said, it just over time, well, it might be a family member initially there. Later, they could rent it out to somebody else. Or, I mean, one of the concerns that, one of the discussions among everything else was the short-term rental systems where you have, it's not even owner occupied, but you have two halves, one smaller than the other one, and they're both become, resident or rental, short-term rental for ag entertainment as being a possibility. And I don't think that there's anything, I don't think that can be prevented right now. Do we have anything in the zoning that prevents short-term rentals? I don't think so. So, not to say that it's bad, but you want to have a control on it. You want to, in terms of density so, yeah, no, I don't see a difference between, and again, you rezone it to an R2 and you're fine, then you can do it. It's a $600 fee. I mean, compared to the cost of building it on, it's not a significant increase, deterrent to putting an addition onto your house. It's like the last addition I saw on a property in Lucas Township was $100,000. So $600 fee is not going to prevent you from putting that addition on. Especially if you're going to have it, you know, plumbing and all that kind of stuff. And again, in rental units, you don't need separate metering. It just becomes part of the rent or heating. You know, it more clearly identifies the two units if there is separate metering, but most apartments I ever lived in didn't have separate meters or separate heating units. And again, it had a single entrance and then the doors came off the hallway. That's, I don't see why we would consider an ADU different than a duplex. Except for functionality. And again, if you have, friends and family that are all living together under one roof, fine. And you wouldn't even have to call it an ADU truly if you have other people that you share your housing with. Oh, I don't know. That's, any other questions?
So thank you. So this is probably not something we have consensus on.
Right.
But something that we probably agree there should be more discussion on as we go forward. So that's our advice.
Great. I'll continue to work on my creativity aspects here. One takeaway I am hearing is that I could perhaps at least work on the transfer of density
Yes, let's go ahead.
component and at least create a
And
better
if we decide
mechanism
we
to do that.
want to change that, so we can always, it'd be easy to amend this then to allow that if we wanted to.
The one thing that I would cautious about rezone is, again, that question about, I mean, well, it's also, we're doing a comprehensive plan update. We really should then make sure a comprehensive plan allows or identifies this flexibility without really kind of, you know, if we can just rezone, then, you know, are we starting to look spot zoning? Are we really looking at agricultural use of the land? Are we really being consistent?
Yeah.
I mean, I can fine tune the language enough to say agriculture district is the catch-all, but it's also a tough one when we are trying to preserve density. Right, that rural character. So once you rezone to an R2, you're changed that rural character.
Right.
So is it about rural character? Or is it about density? Or who's living in the home? I
Or-
can't track who's living in that home.
Right.
Can we track short-term rentals, the change in use? We could. They register with, you know, public health. We get a change in use, then we can track it that way. I don't know. So it's, at least I have this to work with.
Okay.
I promise I'm not gonna go through too many more of these. I just want to.
This is important stuff. And we appreciate your,
I could have probably like 20 more slides of
uh,
ordinance changes, but I'm trying to, you know, narrow down and prioritize. Again, this was kind of a quick slide at our last meeting, but right now, contractor storage yards, right? So the person who's got the landscape business, who has the truck, the trailer, maybe a skidster in general agriculture. Let's just say that's general ag district. Right now, they can't. right? We have numerous violations right now, just based on the contractor storage yard, someone who's operating that home-based
In
business
general ag.
in general ag. Because right now it's only in limited commercial or general commercial they're allowed. So again, we can create standards, right? What is that perception? What are we trying to manage? Right? It's, contractor storage yards are oftentimes, those uses that are supplying a service to that community, right? That local community, the lawn mowing service, the snow plowing, landscaping, creating, use of their existing structures versus requiring them to rezone to general commercial. That's really spot zoning, and I don't think we want, these individuals to have to zone to that. Otherwise, we find, more districts for them to get into if the intent is to have them in a commercial district. So would the committee, again, be willing to consider kind of really, it could be a conditional use permit for any zoning district, but we're managing expectations, right? The lighting, the traffic, the coverage of a lot, screening, potential barriers, concerns. I guess that's where I'm just initially trying to tease out, like, if I'm going to craft language, identifying what those barriers are going to be.
So any district, you're saying that this would be a conditional use provision that could be placed in any district, including a residential district.
Correct, yep. I just put my attached ADU on so my parents can live next to me, and I had my 5-acre parcel that you guys just made me rezone my general ag to R2, so I can have that. Now I can't have my landscape business equipment sitting because I had to rezone to R2. I had to get rid of my chickens too now, by the way.
If we change this, how would that affect the existing contractors' storage yards in quotes?
This would actually give us a mechanism, I think, to actually work with them on coverage. And so can they, actually meet these standards? I think the committee then, that the expectations are defined. This is what we expect. If you can't, then we do have more of an enforcement. I feel like this is, okay, can I downsize to fit this image, this expectation? Otherwise, we're going to have to require them to move out elsewhere.
So in other words, if they're non-conforming right now, they're non-conforming only because they've been there and they haven't been dealt with because it's
Because we haven't had the staff.
the staff and the time and that kind of stuff. Okay. Thank you.
Mhm.
And just remind us what the mechanism for a conditional use permit is.
So we would have, similar to, we would identify it in every district, but then just say in our ordinance, it requires a special exception permit. And then we add standards to our ordinance. So we would define these standards in our ordinance.
And so you're saying we should we should have a mechanism to allow contractor storage units in R1?
Yeah.
Any zoning district?
Any zoning district. It's managing, yeah, it would be, again, what are we trying to minimize? Now we can actually go after
Noise,
lot
ugliness,
coverage. Yep,
traffic,
traffic.
lighting.
Mhm. If they want to exist, then I can get them to go for a conditional use permit and we can regulate them.
That seems like a stretch, a big stretch to me in R1.
Okay,
Other thoughts?
general agriculture district receptive to?
Tammy, if we did this and left out R1, would that mean we couldn't regulate R1 very well, but we could the others?
Correct.
Because,
Because we would have standards for them and we can require that conditional use permit to, in order for them to exist. We give them a mechanism to say that this is what we're trying to manage, that image, you know,
how do we manage, if there's a violation of R1 with a contractor storage yard now, how do we manage that?
they would have to go away. They'd have to go, they could request a rezone. They'd either have you know, an option to rezone. And again, in our ordinance right now, they could rezone to a limited commercial, general commercial. And this is all at scale, right? I mean, I think we define what scale is acceptable. Usually it's lot coverage. You know, you have, you know, 60% is, or 80% is devoted to residential and only 20% is available for the commercial equipment to exist in. You have screening, you have, you know, employee parking, anything like that would be addressed. That makes sense. And I can even bring forward more examples, and maybe we don't have to decide zoning district as much as what the standards would be.
Yeah. Let's talk about standards. Yeah, I think we should give some thought to that.
Okay.
Anyone else have any? Yeah, I think there's an expectation of people in a residential, in most residential areas, that they're not gonna, if they're zoned that way, that they're not gonna have to deal with this sort of thing.
Mhm.
But let's look at some standards that might make that acceptable.
All right, I can do that. I'm gonna add just one more topic. Can we tackle one more topic quick?
Sure.
Yeah.
My neck is getting sore from like looking at you guys this way.
A swivel seat.
It feels awkward looking at this screen. So the next topic is glamping. Right now, we do not define glamping in our zoning ordinance. There's a lot of interest for this in our county. So this is, again, definition right off of Google, basically, but it's a style of camping, right? That has just some basic amenities. I'm, you know, story singing world. So again, it's the platform, it's the tent, the canvas, you know, something basic. You know, I shouldn't say basic, obviously it's glamorous. It's not, you know, the tent on the ground, but it's a, you know, difference between what our traditional camping, right? If we think of camping, what does that mean? We think of either tent camping or we think of the mobile recreational vehicles, campers, more RVs showing up to a site. So one, I would recommend that we would explore camping or glamping as a definition. So right now in our general ag district, we allow private or public and private campgrounds, recreational and education camps. I'm going to recommend that we get rid of the old state statute reference and actually update it to the AdCap 79 administrative code. But ultimately, we only allow campgrounds, well, and we also allow them in our shoreline recreation district. So right now, they would have to be a special exception for that campground. And if we dive deeper into it, it really means if they have 3 or fewer campsites and they're advertising, they're required to meet the standards, right? So they're required to meet that AdCap 79 standard, and they're required to have that special exception permit. If a person who offers 4 or more, no matter what, then they would have to get it. So could we, I guess that's kind of the standards. would the committee be receptive to us adding as a permitted use up to 3 glamping sites without having them go through a special exception permit?
Describe to us what you see as the pros and cons of,
Again, I think it's the scale, you know,
so you're seeing people want to do this.
correct.
People are, yeah.
Yeah, and so do we, I mean, it's a business plan. I almost look at it as a business plan. They get 3 going, they get the revenue, they see what they got. Now I want to go further, then they have to come through and get, you know, the review, further, you know, permits, you know, for that site. So that even if they're advertising those 3 sites, they're gonna have to meet, you know, AdCap 79 and public health licensing. We're just not we're not putting them through that conditional use process for those 3 sites that are basically tents. They still have to meet the sanitation code. They're still having to meet the other code requirements. We're just not making them do that conditional use permit for sites that are 3 and less.
Clarification. So the current situation is that this kind of use would be allowed by special exception. And you're asking the committee if we would be okay with having this use be a permitted use.
Correct.
Okay.
Based on the definition of that glamping, we could, you know, fine tune that, but we define what glamping is. And Mhm. Minus the gourmet meals.
So, I mean, this one has a platform. Do they all seem to require something like that? So that would be a permanent or semi-permanent structure.
See, I don't look at it that way because they're kind of on cinder blocks. So those things can be picked up with a pallet fork and moved at any point. I mean, it really is just a fancy platform sitting on. Again, we can define setbacks and stuff based on that use versus the actual, I carefully want to call it a structure, right? It is a structure,
Structure.
but I don't think of it as a structure that meets you know, the permanent fixed place definition.
So would there be a difference between glamping or camping for 3 or less requirements?
Yeah, because we really don't define camping.
Okay, but I mean, as far as what they have to go through with us.
Correct.
Okay.
They would. Yeah, glamping, camping. It's fair. I know what you're asking because we really don't define camping. So would we, in my mind, we just defined glamping and we say it's permitted, but what about camping?
Right.
Would we allow, yeah, I guess,
Yeah,
what would be the definition of camping?
right. It'd be difficult to distinguish between
Mm-hmm,
the rights to do either of them, I would think.
right. So maybe it is an all-encompassing definition of camping that includes X, Y, Z. That is allowed up to 3.
Very.
So is that done as a way to make money for the landowners?
It is.
And then if you have land like along a river or a creek, it'd make it more appealing to those
Yes.
people.
It does, yep.
Okay.
I'm just trying to think about what are the barriers associated with the special exception process that we were trying to get rid of, I guess. So I guess it's cost, right? It's like $800 or something. And then it's just an extra regulatory step, staff time, the meeting time for the Board of Adjustment. Like, what are the conditions on it, right? With that process, like, would camping permit be denied? What are they looking at right now?
That's a great question. So we just had a conditional use permit that went through for a campground in the town of Weston. The applicant actually was only wanting 3 sites. And she's like, well, if I have to go for this request, I might as well ask for 5. And then the board ended up giving her up to 8. And so the conditions were, basically kind of even reiterating what's in AdCap 79 and what's in our zoning ordinance as far as, meeting the waste requirements, access, waste cleanup. Probably the key component that as a condition that was missing is like the signage. This one was located along the O'Galley River and in a floodplain. Right, so we wanted it to be clearly signed that was the floodplain boundary and no structures, a habitat or, habitable use can be in that. So that would be where the conditions came in differently in that case. The conditional use permit offers more of a mechanism for public comment and adjacent, neighbors to have a say or have an opinion. And we did have several public comments on the one in O'Galley about the rural character and that concern. And the committee still gave them more sites. So it was kind of unexpected that played out that way.
Yeah.
And again, we're talking seasonal, right? I think that probably the big component here, we would even define this as seasonal use. We're not trying to, look at year-round sites for camping.
And I guess that's why I asked about the structure, if the structure itself would be permanent. So you could put a space heater in it and have it available in the winter.
There is winter camping, yeah.
There's winter camping and maybe there's winter glamping. I don't know. Sounds disgusting to me, but.
Well, and we could define that. Seasonal camping. Up to 3 sites.
I don't know. I mean, my biggest
I'm
concern would
losing
be
you
just
guys.
I mean, the we'd be permitting something we have very little experience with. And have little history with what the impacts are on neighbors, where they're managed. And it would be good if we had more of that, maybe from our own experience or from other areas that have done it. To know whether or not the concerns of neighbors would be.
It would be important to understand, to point out though, so for a conditional use permit to be denied, the committee is going to have substantial evidence, or the public would have to have substantial evidence on why that use would not be acceptable. Right, so if it's, kind of based on density, right? If you think of density and kind of density intensity, would 3 sites still fit versus once you get, more sites, right? That's when the concerns come in. Then there is more burden of proof for the landowner to show that they are going to meet real character. They're going to not change the setting of the community.
Are those sorts of standards outlined in the state statute?
They are, yep.
Okay. So if we did this, we would be basically comporting this with against the standards in the state statute.
Correct, yep, yep.
And if they meet
standard.
that, then they would be allowed.
Correct, yep. Yep, public health rule doesn't go away, our sanitation rule doesn't go away, access, signage, all of those rules would still apply to a site.
Could we, could the permitted use be limited to a certain number of sites?
Correct, I would say up to 3, nothing, no more than that.
Yeah.
Or that would be my recommendation.
Right. If
Again,
they want more than that, then they can go this perfect.
correct.
I think we're not approving it, we're just asking. for you
Yeah,
to
just
come back
asking
with a
questions.
Proposal, period.
So you can't have this here, like in shoreline zoning, right? Because it's, the water level could come up, but would the owner have to go out and like measure it? Like, where is the line? Because you don't have lines out there now.
Correct. So we're talking like floodplain.
Right.
So if there's an actual mapped floodplain, they would be able to locate that on the
On here
land.
then.
Yep.
Okay.
We are very lucky in Dunn County to have almost all of our floodplains with designated flood elevations. It's very rare in the state. So we are very lucky to have that data set here.
It seems like we're inclined to ask you to come back with a proposal.
It just, to react to something too
Yep.
further,
Yep.
but just to see if we can spend the
I
time.
mean, it is an economic development tool. It is a way for people to receive some economic value from the campsite, plus also potentially the services. Bring tourists into the area. Allow local people who don't live on a river to have access to a natural area. We don't have any county parks. This offers an alternative to that in a way. Okay. Now I just gave you a bunch more work today, didn't we?
Yes.
Thank you for bringing these to us. These are,
Yes, well, thank you.
So am I understanding that we're going to be talking about chickens and winter use of mobile home or whatever that was, RVs later?
We can, if the committee wants, I have slides prepared if you guys want to keep talking about them. Otherwise, I can save them for another time.
I'm ready for it. If anyone else is good.
Want to go forward?
Well, we could do it another time. I guess it's not
I mean, it's getting late, so
later.
my brain is getting a little fried on all this. So
Okay.
if it's
then
not urgent and I don't
I'll
think it is.
I'll respect that. There's some indication we'd like to defer that discussion to a time when we can really give it fresh attention. So let's do that. And so that takes care of 7B. We have nothing else, I don't think. Announcements from anyone? Okay, next meeting, September 17th. Thanks, everybody. Good discussion.
Be careful what you ask for, right?